I just got this image in my head of like, we fire Dave and replace him with Suppo, and you have this behemoth just sitting there at the computer like...
Yeah, but he wouldn't be quiet.
No.
Anyway. Okay, well, before we keep talking, we should just actually start the podcast. So welcome,
Sweet.
Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We've actually changed the name of the podcast since...
Oh.
Yeah, you're the first person on the newly named Breathless Club. Okay?
And why is it called
Yeah,
that?
good question. So... The podcast was called The Heat Locker before, and the idea when we started it was, Dave, I think my gain needs to go down slightly. I don't know if we can manage. So, guys, just so you're aware, we've got, just like Rogan's got Jamie, we've got Baby Dave, one of my horrible students here, and you'll hear us referring to him throughout the podcast. He's a horrible human.
Who should well and truly be in school, but...
He should be at school today. Yeah, he's going to fail his HSC. Anyway, he's our sound guy, and he's going to be... So anything that's incorrect when you guys are watching this, it's on him. Anyway, back to the... So the Heat Locker was an idea I had a few years ago. The idea was that we have a sauna here,
yep.
And because we always sat in there and had like good chats with people. So the idea was, well, what if we did a podcast where we just sit in there? Then you start to go, oh, but the problem is to run the heat, it's like shitty with the sound gear, and then people get kind of fucked after an hour or so and they can't do anymore.
Imagine it also bring the energy down a little bit, like after you're sitting in there for long enough.
To die. Yeah. So the idea was good, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
So anyway, we just continued with the name, even though we weren't doing them in saunas, we were doing them in gyms all over the place.
Yeah.
And anyway, I kind of felt like it just wasn't right anymore. So the Breathless Club is an affectionate name for the competition team here at Sydney West. The guys that are serious, that's kind of the Breathless Club, right?
Yep.
And here at Sydney West Martial Arts, we're attached... Well, Penrith has one of the highest amounts of brothels of, I think, any town in the country.
That's impressive. Like, Yeah.
So, to kind of wrap this story... The brothel that happens to be attached to the back of our building is called Breathless. You can, Breathless, yep. Go in there, do your thing. Anyway, so it was just an affectionate name, the Breathless Club, and then it's now the name of our podcast. So you are the first person, hopefully first person on Breathless Club. Yep. I'm not sure if you've frequented Breathless.
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's a good answer. Jeremy has a girlfriend. That's a solid answer, Jeremy. We'll see if you winked at me, Jen. We'll see it on the cameras, but... No, there's no winking. Okay.
Well, we now know why Dave isn't at school as often as he should be.
Yeah, well, I've often talked to them about getting some discounts for members, but it just hasn't quite worked out.
Not going to get that sponsorship.
And look, it's a commodity that's been traded for many years. I mean, it's a legitimate...
What is the oldest profession?
They say that.
Should they be paying you for having that up on the screen? Like just having like Breathless Club there? Like so that way you bring in some advertising in for them.
It's a good point. Yeah, anyone here that's looking, that's struggling for a lady friend?
I've listened to your previous episodes, the Heat Locker episodes before. I'm slightly concerned because I feel like this having me on after having like people like Isaac Michelle, Oliver Tarza, Frank Rosenthal is like a sign of like a steady decline in the quality of podcasts.
From here we just cancel you think afterwards. No, mate. Look, so for those that don't, I mean, people that are listening to this, there's a good chance they know who you are. But for those that don't know, Jeremy is an Australian black belt. He's a black belt under Lachlan Giles, currently residing in Sydney. So that's why we're getting a chance to kind of reunite and get back to training together, I suppose.
Yeah, reunite's a good word because it's funny, like long before I ever moved down to Absolute, you and I had about 5 matches in Sydney across the course of...
You keep saying 5.
It's 5. It stands out to
3.
me.
I can't remember the other 2.
There's 5, and I remember because I've lost every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were a while ago. We've often talked about this. Obviously, we were both in our kind of infantile stage of our grappling. You were a purple belt, I was a black belt, so... Jesus, I really had to win, There's nothing worse. You know what it's like now, isn't it? Like, you just absolutely don't want to lose to that up-and-coming stud purple belt.
It's the same with rolling with Dave. I'm like, the amount of times that kid has nearly heel-hooked me, and I've like, even in the training room, I'm like, I can't let this happen.
Yeah, you just got to let your leg break. That's just the only thing you can do. He's over there smiling, everyone, but he's actually he might be the future of Australian Jiu-Jitsu if he can keep his shit together. But
that is not a good sign of the times.
So anyway,
yep.
Jeremy, you're not just a local black belt. You're actually one of our best competitors, I want to say. You've competed on really some big shows. You've travelled internationally. You've competed against big names and always done exceptionally well. So I think, credibility-wise, it's great to have you on. We've been meaning to have a chat forever, so
yeah,
we'll see where this goes. But welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. So it's good to be on. It's good to have some chats with you and have it recorded, because we have some interesting chats just in the gym about jiu-jitsu, life, different things.
Normally horrible shit that people shouldn't be recording.
Well, yeah.
From me, not from you. You're a decent person. I'm going to do my best to moderate, else our viewer base might not want to listen anymore, but
yeah,
we'll see. I don't want to moderate too much. We've got to still be real here.
Well, I guess let's kick it off with the most recent thing that happened, which was who's number one. I'm still catching up on some of the matches, but you've got some really interesting insights over, I guess, what's happened through that event, and looking at the progression of different teams in jiu-jitsu. We saw Damian Anderson recently against what's the gentleman's name, the Giant Slayer?
I don't know his name, but you know what, we actually have the capability. Since we have Baby Dave here, we're going to use this screen here in the middle just if we want to bring anything up. So Baby Dave, bring up, he's going to use flow grappling, so bear with us, guys. There's going to be multiple advertisements here. But if you bring up Damian's last match with the tiny little man, his Instagram handles the Giant Slayer, but I'm not sure what his...
if you put in just Damian Anderson, should probably be the most recent one.
Yeah, this... So Damian's... I trained with Damian a fair bit at Henzo's.
Yeah.
Damian... I want to know, was he a purple belt when I was there, or was he a blue belt? I think he might have even still been a blue belt when I first went to Henzo's. And he was always good. Good where him and I would have tough rounds. And I'm always... I remember always thinking, Jesus Christ, how much do I suck? I'm going over here, and these blue and purple belts from Danaher's team are just as good as me or better. I'm just hanging in here. And he was one of those guys, I always knew he was going to be...
Yeah, I think from I only heard his name maybe 2 years ago. I'd only heard it, I think maybe in some stuff related to the team going out of Puerto Rico, and I was like, oh, I don't really know who this guy is. You see a lot of purple belts and things on the way up, but I think I saw his first match shortly after that, or at least the first match that I saw of him, and I was like, oh no, this kid's legit, and he's very sharply just rising through the ranks, and he's taking out some big names, which is really cool to see.
Well, he's known for his outside heel hook. His outside heel hook is very good.
I've heard he is the master of outside ashi as well.
He is good from there, which is, it's funny, and you and I both probably, if someone was going to put us into a pigeonhole, we'd be leg lockers, I suppose. And outside heel hooks are more, even though they're the first thing we show people, they're actually, against a skilled opponent, they can be quite difficult to execute.
Yeah, I think we've even talked about sort of what would consider to be the fundamental sequence of an outside heel hook. That idea of inside leg positioning to force heel exposure into outside leg positioning. Important fundamental sequence that teaches a lot of really important skills, but it's also sort of the last one that you really master. Because of so many transitions through the sequence, there's a lot more that can go wrong. But at the same time, it's good to teach it to white belts, because they start thinking about, well, maybe not white belts, but white belt level leg lockers.
Teach those white belts, get them all.
But it illustrates sort of the right ideas behind what we're trying to achieve with leg locks and leg positioning.
Yeah, but it's like in drilling, you can get it and you go, oh, that really hurts. But then you go against someone who really wants to rotate hard, straighten their foot. Maybe they're flexible in the ankles and hips. So to be someone like Damian, who, how'd you go, Dave? Did you find him? Well, I mean, you don't even have it on the screen anymore.
So is it?
I think it's the most recent one. Oh, actually no, because they just had that.
Okay, so he had another
event.
match. Yeah, we can talk about that. He had another match. Also, guys, sorry, it seems to be every bus in Penrith is outside my window right now. Eventually, I'd like to actually get where I've got a studio, would be the best case, but I'm hoping it's not going to deter from our conversation too much. But, this is real life. There's cars outside.
We'll work with what we've got.
Exactly right. Look, so our baby Dave is failing. Jamie on the Rogan podcast is, everyone talks about him being the king of Googling. This kid, he's got nothing else to do with his whole life except be on the internet. Can't even find a jiu-jitsu match. But
I think he even started off by spelling Damian's name incorrectly.
Oh yeah, he can't spell. Yeah, this is another thing.
I mean, we've even seen Dave misspell his own name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the future. Look, it doesn't matter, Dave. Don't stress, mate. It's not too bad. Look, it was good. The match itself was good. There was obviously a size disparity, but that guy, I think, tends to go in a lot of matches where he's probably undersized. He's like, is he actually a midget? I mean, there's got to be a size where is midget the word? What's the appropriate word?
I don't know. I don't want to get
You don't wanna say
cancelled.
any of that.
I don't want to get cancelled.
I'm happy to be cancelled.
Okay.
I don't know what the official dwarf.
I think dwarfism's very specific because
Right.
it's to do with it's relative between height and limb size.
Okay.
I think it's
So he might be a dwarf?
He might be.
I mean, I think it's kind of cool to say I'm a dwarf. I mean, it might be annoying when you want to go on roller coasters and stuff, but
yeah. I wanted to go back to a point you were making about the outside heel hook because I think it's there's a lot that you can like unpack there about probably jiu-jitsu in general. We were talking about, you can drill outside heel hooks and then, applying them in training. But then taking that from training and successfully applying it in training to like true breaking pressure in competition, it seems like that's almost like the eternal struggle. Is just like trying to take things that theoretically work to like actually finding success in competition with those techniques. Like you see it a lot with an outside heel. It's like even when you do get breaking pressure, like you've got like a strong bite, elevated heel, it's connected to your chest. If it breaks in the wrong way, you get a heel slip straight away. Like if you get like a crack at the ankle instead and it like loosens up and slips.
Yep.
And I think just, on the topic of outside heel hook, I think like that's like an interesting sort of eternal problem to have in jiu-jitsu because then you got to like start working from there and you're like, okay, well, like let's start talking about like sustained breaking and then, then you start applying that to, I guess, the rest of jiu-jitsu. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that there or if that...
Yeah, I mean, specifically with the outside heel hook because you've got to get internal knee rotation initially so you can actually get the heel or at least neutral knee position. If the knee's totally turned out, you just won't get the heel. So let's say now I've got the heel. If I cause too much internal knee rotation, now I'm kind of bringing my breaking pressure into the front of the kneecap, whereas I need to externally rotate that bent knee. I think there's a lot of components to it that people probably are never really explained correctly. So people don't understand the mechanics of what they're actually trying to do. They're just kind of being told, hook the heel, drive your hips in, and you're probably going to get something happen.
And I think exactly what you're talking about in terms of, I guess, substandard coaching on an outside heel hook is that it's a lot of people that have never tried to apply one in competition. They don't have real world experience. It's there's a lot of theoretical
going on as jiu-jitsu becomes more popular. More people do it. If more people are doing it, there's more people that go, oh, you know what, I could be a coach. I like telling people stuff and I like being the guy in the front of the room. I mean, we've all seen this before. You and I hold ourselves to a very high standard for our coaching. But there's a lot of people who just want to be the guy at the front of the room.
A lot of guys that are trying to LARP into being like a John Danaher. And there's almost... I think John Danaher, fantastic coach at jiu-jitsu. The problem is people wanting to be him have also taken the other aspects of John Danaher and gone like, oh, I'm going to do that too, which is...
Murdering hookers?
Well, I was going to say more along the lines of like not rolling, like,
gotcha.
but like he's got like an actual reason to like not roll. He's got like a, a serious hip issue, a knee issue. But then I think you're going to see a lot of other coaches that go, oh, that's the easy route. I can just sit on the side and then just tell people what to do without actually having any experience. But you're talking about someone that's, been coaching for 30 years in jiu-jitsu and he's got many, many years of rolling leading up to that point. It's only a relatively recent thing, I believe, that he wasn't rolling and wasn't training, but he still has an understanding of, I guess, like what real world jiu-jitsu is meant to be like.
Well, he has that magic word that you need to have, which is credibility. Yeah. If you haven't got credibility, really in any venture, like the first thing I want to see if somebody's going to explain something or show something to me, I want to know, why are you the person I should listen to? So John gained credibility via, his coaching spoke for itself just with George St. Pierre, just with like the fact he was at Henzo had such credibility in the game. So just being a very early day Henzo black belt, he just had so many layers of credibility. That
and he was surrounded by those people, like other people like Matt Serra, like Dante Riviera, even like I guess like later days like Tom DeBlas, like just like so many people surrounded him that really sort of I guess like fed into John's credibility and like he got to see a lot of like different aspects of real world grappling, MMA, like, you know, just various martial arts, and consumes himself with it.
Well, yeah, he's a special species, Danaher. I'm not sure what he is, and I'm not convinced he's the same as us, because
Lizard person.
he's a brilliant guy. He's unreal. I as far as this being my craft and something that I do with my life, he's right at the top of who I kind of look towards. So, you know, he's just phenomenal. But yeah, he's got credibility. He can get away with not training, because even in not training, he still seems to continually produce the right coaching goods. We've seen so many of these other guys that they barely rolled at the best of times, and if they did, it was like with a little white belt, or someone they knew they could get it over, because of that ego thing. It's like, oh, what if I get tapped? And what I mean, I get tapped by guys in my training room. But for me, if I know I'm good and I'm getting tapped by my students, I mean, that's like the ultimate
that's the goal.
validation, right? It validates what we're doing to an extent.
You see this a lot with a lot of, I think, high-level competitors that move over into coaching, where they're good competitors, but they don't become good coaches. And then a good coach should be basically elevating their students like above themselves and trying to like push them like past the successes that they had. If you're not doing that, like, it's either because you don't actually want to help those people, or because you don't have the ability to. And I feel like we see a lot of that in jiu-jitsu as well. Like, a lot of guys that are good at jiu-jitsu and don't quite understand like why they're good, and they just go on to be average coaches, and like the fact that they were these high level competitors means very little when for like, I guess, their ability to be a good coach.
Yeah, the two are not necessarily related to each other. Being able to impart knowledge and being able to physically do something, especially in a physically demanding sport, sometimes they can be really divorced from each other, and you see it a lot. You see, and this is the thing, like guys come out and do seminars, right? I mean, for years, like there was a parade of Brazilians, for instance, that would come out, and it was like, he's a 10-time world champion, and it was just everyone had to bow down, and you just pay him his $150. He rocks up with a seminar late and drunk, and, you know, spits you out some random. I mean, you've been to them, I've been to them. Make you do push-ups for half an hour, and you kind of finish up going, oh, I got a photo with him, I got to say hello, but you know, you didn't really have that much knowledge imparted. And then there could be some guy who wasn't that world champion, but his ability to transfer information to you is phenomenal. And that's, I suppose, what you got to look for in a coach, more than just the accolades. Now, definitely, if your coach has never competed or never even been around anything high level, I suppose then it comes back to that, how did he get his credibility? Normally, you don't see a random guy that never did anything at all, and then he's got really high level students. There seems to be a certain disparity there. That's not always the case, but yeah, it's an interesting topic. I mean, we could talk all day on crap coaches.
Oh yeah, exactly. The list of crap coaches is tremendously longer than the list of good coaches, and I think there might be people listening as well that they like, I agree with that, and then but they've got like their list of like in their head of good coaches. I'd take that list of like good coaches that I think most people like have, probably halve that at the very least. Like there's a lot of people that have credit as being good coaches that have achieved very, very little, and like as coaches they don't really impart any wisdom. They kind of just like.
So what's your advice then? Let's say I'm a white belt or blue belt, I'm starting out, and because here's what happens to people, they just go to their local school, they're like, I kind of like martial arts, or I like the UFC. They look up jiu-jitsu, they go to the nearest spot, and they go down there, and the guy can ragdoll them because maybe he's just done a bit more, and maybe he's a bigger guy, and they just go, my coach is phenomenal, he's unreal. And we've seen that time and time again. How do we gear up these people who are maybe newer in the game to actually, what should their checklist, because it can't just be accolades, and it can't, like, what is it their checklist should be looking for?
So on that, like, I'll give a more direct answer in just a second, but when I was coming up in jiu-jitsu, I was very fortunate when I came up under Luke Beston. He was very encouraging.
The ultimate troll of the internet, right?
The ultimate troll of the internet. Blue belts live in fear. But he was very encouraging. He was like, you know, he's a true martial arts nerd, and he was really like encouraging the idea of like look to every other source, like try and like draw everything in as much as possible, like try and like study every high level competitor, take from them what you can. He had no ego about that sort of thing. And so when leg locks were coming along, he was just like, yeah, get straight into it. Like, I'm all for it. He didn't hold back on it. at the time, because I think because of the state of leg locks when I wanted to start doing them about 2015, his policy in the gym at the time was like, okay, we don't do heel hooks. But when like people started showing interest in them, like, and I was like, I blue belt at the time, I'm like, hey, I want to start learning heel hooks. He's like, okay, like let's just start adding them in. And with
It's very
that,
open-minded.
yeah, like super open-minded for the time. Like no other gym was really allowing that sort of thing, or even just like, you know, had sort of that check on their own ego to be, you know, sort of like the white belt on that sort of topic and like admit to their own inexperience in that particular area. And so the approach I took at the time, and I think this is a good approach even now, like it's still the approach I take, is I look to competition footage first. There's a lot of instructionals out there. Like I have an instructional, like, and I think that the content.
Jeremy, where could people buy that instructional?
Technically.com, spelled TECHNIQLY.
I'm worried that Baby Dave definitely couldn't spell that. Dave, bring it up on the screen, mate. Let's bring up Jeremy's thing. Sorry, keep talking, Jeremy, but good luck with that, Dave. But anyway.
Let's see how he goes. Even if you just type in, like, Jeremy Skinner instruct... Oh, perfect. He nailed it, I think.
Oh. Yeah, well, he probably thinks that's how it's spelled properly.
But so I had this instructional, and, like, I put on there, like, techniques that I use regularly and, like, techniques that I have a lot of confidence in. But I'd say, like, it's hard to sift through the shit. Like there's a lot of material out there, also on YouTube as well, like a lot of free material, and you have no way of really knowing what's good. Even if it's a high-level competitor, this material they put out might not necessarily be what they do.
Jeremy, look at this. Fundamental leg entanglements, escapes, and heel hooks by Jeremy Skinner. This looks nice. Buy with PayPal. £30. It's a British... what's that in Australian? Like $1 million? What's that worth to be?
I think the exchange... what's the exchange at the moment? I can't tell with the whole world having gone to shit, but...
We'll buy that later on and we'll support you, Jeremy. I don't want to give Dave my internet details, or else he'll probably put them out for everyone will know it. But nice work, Dave. Good. Congratulations there, mate. Sorry, yeah.
No, all good. So there's a lot of high-level competitors that'll put out instructionals or like just put out material out there, and it's not actually what they do. I think... There's even like a lot of high-level competitors, like as we talked about, that don't make good coaches. They have a certain idea of what they think they do, but what they do in practice is totally different. So I think the best approach to take would be to watch competition footage and look at what they actually do in competition, then work back from there.
Would you say your average guy that's starting out, though, can look at a match and appreciate the nuances of what's happening, as far as he placed his hand here, he caused this reaction, you know what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, when I was a white belt, like I was studying the Meow Brothers, and it definitely majority of it, like 99% of what happened in the match and like the important details went over my head. What I would say starting out is pick one competitor and then look for trends. So instead of trying to watch one match and be like, oh, this is what happened, watch all of their matches and try and identify with like the key situations they end up in consistently, and look for repetition, look for trends, and then work back from there. Like, you know, every single time, like, you know, this competitor gets to here, he's gripping the arm in a certain way. What is he doing first when his opponent isn't really doing anything to defend? And then start looking at like what are the common reactions he might get when he gets to that position. And I'd also try and probably start from more fixed positions, like things like the back, mount, half guard, rather than, you know, chaotic, scrambly sort of positions, like open guard, stuff, yeah. Exactly, open guard, any sort of wrestling situation like turtle attacks. I think you can definitely study those positions, but I think starting out, if you have no experience at all, like it's like there's just too much going on, it's going to be hard to identify the key details of what they're looking for. But I think you can start out with like, slower positions, look for trends, and then you can start expanding out to looking at their teammates. Are their teammates doing the same thing from those positions? If they are looking at doing the same things from those positions, then it tells you that they've got like a system in place. And then you can even start looking at their instructionals, I'd say. Like I think the greatest example of that is the Danaher Death Squad. All of those guys are on this...
Former Danaher Death Squad.
Yeah, well, I think it's shrunk now. But like looking at what that team does, because you watch them all compete, they all do almost the same thing from each of those positions. They have preferences over like, you know, which particular guard they play, but from each of those guards, each of those like dominant, like, you know, submissions, they all do a very similar thing, and you can start looking at trends across the team.
They tend to have a core group of skills that has been, and I make no, like I coach very similar to how John, or I try to coach very similar to how John does in the way they'll look at and go, John has set out pretty clearly what he thinks are the highest percentage techniques from all the specific positions, and he kind of makes sure all his students are across understanding those concepts, and then they kind of, could it just be their personality? They might be more outgoing. They might be more, depending which way they go with it. And it seems to be a good strategy. So yeah, what you're saying makes exact sense. So I mean, that being the case, if someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I want to get an instructional," I would generally lead them towards John, just because I know he's going to explain things as a kind of whole concept rather than just here's a move. And now some people like to just turn it on and see a move and copy the move. But I feel like if you can give people the tools, it's kind of like, do you want to teach them how to fish, or do you just want to put the line in their hand and tell them to chuck it in the water? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly why I think like competition footage is the way to go, because then you have to essentially put your thinking cap on and actually try and like understand what's happening. I think getting spoon-fed the instructionals, you actually do see this with certain competitors. When it becomes their turn to start teaching, they don't have the tools to like talk about their thought process, break down what's actually going on. They can only show you the steps to a technique. This is something that
copycatting.
Exactly. Like this is something I go through with my students. Like I even had a conversation recently with one student where like every single time he comes to me with questions, and like I think questions are fantastic, but the problem is that he'd ask me first before trying to solve the issue himself. I like it can be he solves the issue himself, and then he like, even if he feels like he comes up with a suitable answer and then comes to me, that's fine. I still would like to see my students think for themselves, try and solve the problems, and then like, whether they do or they don't solve the issue, like then they can come talk to me about it. Only because I want them to be able to actually be thinking about jiu-jitsu. Like I could easily just I feel like easily give them the answer to the problem, but there's other things that I'd like them to learn, not just like, the answer to the question. That there's greater skills.
You teach him to fish, right?
Exactly.
You're trying to get him to think. Yeah, I think that's definitely the kind of next evolution of better coaching, rather than just here's a move, do it. Now, I suppose then what we need to consider is that in a room full of individuals, some are just coming along, they want a bit of fun, they want to learn this jiu-jitsu stuff, just show me like, where do I put my hand? And then there's the people like you and I and Baby and the other guys that are like, okay, I want to know that next detail, that why are we doing this? And so I suppose it depends on the individual too.
For sure. Yeah.
We were talking about that Who's Number One card. Did you watch Gordon and Philly Fresh?
Yes, I did. That's a match where I have to go back multiple times to rewatch.
Right?
There was just so much to unpack on that. I think like any good competitor, you need to watch their match a few times to unpack what's happened. But that one in particular, there was just so much happening. It was 20 minutes, like submission after submission after submission, like escapes. 15 minutes, my bad.
I would have liked 20 minutes. We would have got more of it, but I
actually, because I watched the replay of it, like when I looked it up on Flow Grappling, it said 30 minutes.
Bring it up, Dave. Bring the match up. I'm not sure if we can run it. I don't know if my YouTube following is so small that it won't be an issue. We'll see what happens. Leave Jeremy's thing up there. Yeah, go back to Flow and bring up that, Dave. So it was an exhibition, and it's funny. Like Gordon draws a lot of attention, I should say, both good and bad.
Yeah.
And I think he's fine with all of it, and I think all of it just pushes him to be a bigger brand and jiu-jitsu to be more important, more popular. So Gordon's one of the better things that's happened to jiu-jitsu, if we're going to be brutally honest. I think so. Whether you like him or not is irrelevant, but the amount of eyes that gets, I mean, look at him, he's dressing like a cowboy. It's fantastic.
It looks like he's worn that same outfit, I think, a week straight now.
He wore it to the Worlds, but maybe cowboys wear one. I mean, you got to think you're out on the ranch, you just wear the one. You're not going to change every, you know what I mean? It's a real cowboy. What happened, Dave? Not working?
Oh, no, it's working.
Okay.
I think you skip ahead about 5 minutes in. That's when the action starts.
Yeah. Did you manage to get past the ads, did you? So they reckon Gordon was about 240. He came in pretty big.
Very heavy.
Yeah. I mean, looks thick.
I wish I could get that heavy because...
Imagine you at 240, Jeremy. I wouldn't want to train with you.
I wouldn't need to train. It's okay. Like at that weight, like no one knows jiu-jitsu at that weight except for Gordon.
It's a fair statement. Are you denying that Tim Spriggs is a champion of the world?
He's a champion of the world.
He's the champion of the world right now.
Like,
well, who's number one belt anyway? Yeah.
I mean, like he fits the criteria of world champion, like the champion of the world. I don't think he necessarily has to do a lot of jiu-jitsu to achieve that, but
it's Are you pausing it, Dave, or what's happening?
Do you want me to play it?
I don't know. You can just let it play. I don't see why not. People might be. I mean, this is both a favoured entry by you and I, Jeremy. But back step entry when they sit to a hip from a butterfly half. It's just rock solid. Absolutely rock solid.
Like I did a breakdown of that on YouTube recently. Like,
what's your Instagram?
Jeremy Paul Skinner.
Jeremy Paul Skinner. Okay. Make sure you guys are following.
Just went with the
full name.
The triple barrel.
That's your middle name?
Yeah.
My middle name's Paul also.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
I don't know what I'm going to do with that information, but like it's nice to have it, I guess.
I'm picturing the Step Brothers
Did we just become best friends?
Yeah, do you want to go do karate in the garage? We're going to do karate later on tonight, actually. He tapped it. So Gordon tapped him pretty quick. I think he just did that to be like, look, I can put you away kind of early. And then he just played around a bit.
Because I think like you see this with, like, say, for example, the Floyd Mayweather match with Conor McGregor. Like, that went until, what was it, the 11th?
Yeah, 10 or 11, yeah.
Like, late into the match. And, like, I think, like, Floyd could have finished off McGregor early on. And that's sort of, like, the thing that people hold on to, the McGregor fans, is, but he survived 10 rounds. And it's like, yeah, but, like, did he really, though? Like he could have easily been taken out in the first round, I think.
I think anyone that does jiu-jitsu probably knew that if Gordon didn't submit him at all, it was because he chose to. But you know what? Some people don't, and I've talked about this before, and I think we've talked about it. A lot of people don't understand. You and I understand the levels of jiu-jitsu because we've been in the game now for a while. We've also competed at a good level, but also trained with a lot of the actual very best. So it's good. You kind of really learn where you fit in the pecking order. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think some people never actually know. Even some coaches, I think they actually don't know where they fit. And I think the more they're removed from it, the less they understand where they fit and where everyone else is. Yeah,
like it's exactly what we were talking about before with coaches that are just going to be sitting off to the side. They don't ever really train, or even just people that have only ever trained at their gym. They go, like, they have the guy in their gym that's like maybe the black belt, like, and he's, he beats up on everyone there. Like, maybe he is the coach that does roll, and he bashes everyone there, but like they have no idea like how far down in the pecking order that their coach actually is.
Yeah,
and just
he might not know either.
He might not.
You've never been exposed to that. Like, I always knew I wasn't the best in the world, but I always, for Australian grappling, I was doing okay just on the local tournaments. For submission grappling, I was doing as good as I could, and I went to New York. And I remember at Henzo's a day going with Nick Ronan. He was a purple belt. Nick, at this stage, nobody knew who Nick Ronan was. And I trained with Nick, and on the back he submitted me two times in a 5-minute round or something. And it was like I didn't know jiu-jitsu. And I was like, the fuck? Like, this does, and you kind of get a feel. Now, many years later, I've bridged the skill gap, obviously, as I've immersed myself in that. But it gives you a really good idea on where you fit. And I've trained with Gordon. I've spent multiple rounds with Gordon, and it's just he's from my understanding he's the best ever, and he's shown it in a competition setting too. And he makes it look so easy too, and I think that's part of the reason why that people don't know, like, I guess, like, how good Gordon really is when he competes. It doesn't look like he's doing anything all that different. Doesn't look like he's doing anything all that crazy either. His jiu-jitsu looks very simple. It's like just like what people would say about Hodger, but I guess he's doesn't get the same level of respect as Hodger. Like, people really like talk about how fundamentally sound Hodger is and how he's got a relatively simple looking game, but he's just applying it with like such sophistication. That's right, Dave. You can cut that, but I don't know whether we're allowed to put the whole thing on it. I don't know how that works. You're exactly right, and I still feel the reason a lot of people give Hodger that respect is because he trained in the gi and he won world championships in the gi. And I mean, you and I this is a good segue to maybe talk about that. You and I definitely favour no gi. At my academy, there's only gi classes in fundamentals. I start them out. They don't even have to. If people want to go straight to no gi, they can. Yep. But our fundamental sessions are in the gi, and who knows, over time I may even adjust that. But all the rest of my classes are all no gi because that's what I enjoy. It's what I enjoy teaching, and it also seems to be what a lot of people enjoy also. Yeah. A lot of people just never got the option because they went to do jiu-jitsu and their only thing they were presented with was gi jiu-jitsu, and then like a little party class once a week, whereas we do no gi, and it was kind of just, we weren't being specifically taught no gi skills. You were just doing your gi game kind of without the gi, and we went from there. But I feel like there's more of a division than ever before. I mean, I think you're the same as me. If you never put a gi on again, you're probably not overly unhappy. Yeah, like at this stage for me, the gi is like this nice little interesting costume that's like
a throwback.
It's cute, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Halloween.
But there's such a there's such a divide now between where gi and no gi jiu-jitsu is. It's almost like a shame that we still call no gi jiu-jitsu. Like I think, and that might be part of the issue, is the fact that we attribute the same name to it when it's a completely different thing. Like no one says that judo and wrestling is the same sport, and that like if you look at the rule sets, it's like the difference isn't just like, oh, one's wrestling with a gi on and one's wrestling without a gi on. It's like they're two completely different sports, and I think the same applies for submission grappling versus jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like I think there's just such a massive divide there, at competition level, like that it's disingenuous to say that they're the same thing.
And this was an argument that I had with one of my first coaches. The two guys that gave me my black belt were Anthony Perosh and Elvis Sinisic. And you were saying Luke Beston was quite good with being fairly open-minded, and I always felt like Elvis was like that, and Anthony was very specific on what he wanted from jiu-jitsu and for us as students to do. And I remember running into a lot of pushback from Anthony when I was wanting to focus on some leg locking and things, and he always used to say to me, he said, Luke, all the ADCC champions are also gi champions. And I always thought, yeah, I understand that's maybe what the data's showing, but at this stage, it's just because they were the guys who were the professional athletes, and there wasn't this other group of people. So the best in the gi just took the gi off, and they were still just better grapplers than the other guys were. Yeah. Now we've seen a complete shift where there's professionals in no gi grappling who just literally don't put a gi on. And then there's the other side of it, like
I completely agree with your thoughts on that. The analogy I sort of an analogy, but like is that if judo, for example, decided to come along with like a judo rule set where they just took the gi off, but it's the same thing. It wasn't wrestling. You still had to adopt the upright posture. They had the exact same stalling calls. You would generally see very early days that the only people that would be winning this no-gi judo rule set would be the gi judo competitors, until eventually, the sort of like the training for this no-gi rule set sort of like came out of its infancy and started developing sort of its own training. You'd start to see like the gi competitors lose, and then eventually the no-gi competitors take over. And I think it's the same with jiu-jitsu, that for the longest time, since it's such a niche rule set, so different to the other types of grappling, that when majority of the people that are doing the sport are going to be training the gi, they're the only ones that are getting the funding to actually be able to train full-time, that they're going to be the ones that are going to dominate at the highest levels.
How long till no-gi judo just became wrestling?
Well, so that's another thing. That's why it's not exactly a perfect sort of explanation for it, yeah.
But I really like judo. I think it's fantastic, and I think the concepts of kazushi and off-balancing and foot sweeps, and I think there's so many skills that carry over to grappling. I think for a long time, a lot of us didn't appreciate that enough. If you were a gi player, I think you really would want to nearly be a black belt in judo as well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because for the longest time, a lot of jiu-jitsu black belts were also judo black belts. Like Hodger, for example, judo black belt. A lot of the Gracies earlier days were all judo black belts and like trained judo as well.
I have to wonder how, because it's like, because there is a degree of crossover, I wonder how many were black belts in jiu-jitsu, and then the judo coach comes in and he's like, look, these guys are better than, and they just kind of, before you know it, they're just given a black belt. But I'm not saying they're not dual black belts, but I wonder how many of them were kind of, he was already a good grappler and they kind of bumped him into being a black belt quicker than just someone that just started from scratch doing judo. And
same with like if a judo black belt like came into jiu-jitsu, just get bumped to blue belt straight away.
You see it, yeah. And look, they're two different things, but yeah, judo's fantastic. I think people should, if people are out there looking for things to study, I think understanding off balances and sweeps. I think there's also a bunch of like low risk options like Hosotogaris and things you can use that are high reward and very low risk. You don't always have to just be shooting doubles and singles.
Yeah, I think judo as well, it's really interesting because it seems to have a better curriculum in terms of bringing new people into the sport, and like seems like there's a better curriculum for taking people through to black belt level that wrestling and jiu-jitsu don't have. I think jiu-jitsu's getting there. I think it's sort of stagnated a little bit, but judo seems to have like a interesting approach. Like obviously it changes with like different competitors, but like if you watch the way Travis Stevens breaks down, it's like, that idea of like, the four corners, like to off balance someone. I feel like we don't see that sort of thing in jiu-jitsu or wrestling.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, well, it's that concept of kazushi. It's such an integral part of judo. I've got an old judo book, and it was like one of the initial judo books written in Japan many years ago, and I love it. It still holds true. A lot of it doesn't change. How to off balance someone doesn't really change. Like we're seeing a lot of innovation in what we do, but it's like they kind of pretty much worked out. Like, this is how I can off balance someone if you force them towards this corner or this direction. And
the only real changes in judo seem to come from rules at this stage. Like, I think one of the major ones relatively recently was the changes in grip breaking in judo. They can now only grip break with one hand. I was actually asking Keller about this recently. I can't remember the name of the throw, but it's a double sleeve throw where you start almost going in on a seonagi, seisa or something like that.
It's not a seonagi.
No,
it's not an ippon seonagi.
It's got a different name, and I remember only seeing that like within the last couple of years in judo, and I was like, well, I can't imagine that they've just come up with a new throw. So I asked Keller about it. And,
the rules were dictating it.
Yeah, and he said, it's just a pure rule change. Basically, the grips you take for that throw are very difficult to break without using two hands. Like it's very tough to break that with just one hand, and that's why you suddenly see like it's emergence in the sport, or just at least its rise in popularity.
I think judo as a sport sucks. I think judo as a martial art is awesome. Judo as a sport sucks. If you understand the rules, like, well, that's why I say as a sport. Like, when I say a sport, I mean the rules you compete under if you wanted to do judo. I think they suck. You only have to watch the Olympics for a bit and you go, oh, they're nearly taking the life out of what is really a fantastic martial art.
Yeah. And that's only like it seems like it's only really gone that route in the last 10 years, because I was listening to Travis Stevens recently on the Lex Friedman. He was even talking about, I think it was like 2011, like being able to still do leg grabs and like hitting like a double leg during a judo match. And I was like, why did that go away? Like, really neutering the sport. And
I mean, I have to think, was it to stop wrestlers coming in just shooting doubles? I don't know. Like, I mean, normally it's for a reason.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why you weren't allowed to grab like double collar anymore, because like guys would just be able to basically go double collar and just like sag. And it makes it actually hard then, like when you want to start taking things from judo to apply it to jiu-jitsu, because you're like, well, is this only working because of a specific rule change? Like,
exactly
you have to go back and you're almost better off watching older judo matches and drawing from them when they had a lot more freedom in what they could do.
That's a good point.
Which is sort of backwards in what you think martial arts should be. Like every new generation,
an evolution that gets better. Yeah.
Every year the judo, the wrestling you see should get better and better and better. But it seems like with judo that's not really the case, unfortunately.
Well, the rules dictate the martial art, unfortunately, and that's the thing with jiu-jitsu as well. For a long time, the IBJJF were the only body that people kind of look to as the actual legitimate body, and I mean, still probably to a degree. And as we've often talked about, their rule sets are pretty funky. There's some things that we absolutely haven't agreed on. And it's only really, was it last year or this year, they changed the reaping rule at the higher levels at brown and black belt?
I think it was only like, I think they announced it last year, and it only took place this year that they actually started allowing heel hooks.
Yeah, I mean, you and I probably are of the same mindset on this. I think the reaping rule in jiu-jitsu is idiotic. I think it's absolutely idiotic. I've seen people teach, you put your leg here, this is very dangerous. I've heard them say that to students. This is very, very dangerous. Yet it's the same guy who will coach someone to jump guard.
Yeah.
And I think jumping guard causes heaps more catastrophic injuries. If you understand the way a reap works, and if your students learn from day one, if your leg's got a big bend in it, don't just aggressively straighten and turn into it. If that person learns that, they're going to have no problems with reaps. Like, there's...
Like take my word. This is what I say to people. It's like, take my word for it. I put a lot of effort into trying to break people's legs. You're not going to accidentally break someone's leg with a reap. It's like, because I wish I could do that. If like that's how it worked, my job would be so much easier.
I think if the individual having the reap applied to them reacts very poorly, there can be the danger is if you've got a big bend in your leg and then you straighten and turn into it. We saw it with Cub Swanson. Do you remember on that quintet a few years ago now? Jake Shields reaped him. See if you can bring that up, Dave. See if you can find that. Jake Shields reaping.
Should be up on UFC Fight Pass.
Cub Swanson. Yeah. Maybe see if it's on YouTube, because Fight Pass is just so clunky. See how you go with it. But you're doing a good job over there, baby Dave. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this format. I'm loving having you here to have a chat, Jeremy.
I'm enjoying it.
I'm hoping the format also makes sense for people to watch. We're kind of switching between our individual cameras and the overall camera. So I hope the experience is good for you guys listening. But yeah, anyway, Jake throws a reap in, and it was like Cub maybe hadn't been exposed to that a lot in the training room, and he just aggressively turned the wrong way, and he just popped his own ACL. It was...
yeah. And even on that, though, like you mentioned, like jumping guard, for example,
Mm-hmm.
in worst... Like, obviously, you know, you don't want to suffer any sort of injury of any kind, like any sort of knee injury, but the disparity in the amount of damage that gets done
Mhm.
is... They're almost not even comparable. Like, you're talking about, like, jumping guard, you could potentially, like say, for example, Adam Jones, Craig's brother, like, snapped his shin in half. Versus maybe a partial tear of the LCL. It's like the difference there is not even comparable.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally... Did you find it, Dave, or you had no luck there? I can see what you've brought up. Cubs wants... It says YouTube at the top there, Cub, but it just looks like Cubs talking on a podcast about it.
Podcast.
Tears his ACL, YouTube. Yeah, go to the one below it. That one. Click on that, Dave. What's this? Maybe on it, and also bring up another tab. Oh, they just got a podcast there. It doesn't look like anything useful. No, that's no good. Bring up... just go to YouTube, Dave, and bring up BJJ jumping guard injuries. I don't normally like to watch these videos, but... And we're not trying to scare you at home from doing jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu generally is a safe sport, but one of the rules that I have in my training room, there's 3 main rules, and these are John's rules. No jumping guard, no kani basamis, which are a scissor takedown, and no sagging onto the side of people's knees from body locks. If you adhere to those, knee injuries go down substantially. I hate even... Anyway, let's see. So this is like 2 white belts. They're chicks that just want to do some jiu-jitsu and have some fun, and I'm assuming this goes bad. I can explain why, or maybe you can explain, Jeremy, what happens. We'll just have a look. But it's always the same sort of thing.
Yeah, because you're going to generally see like the person either go through the side of their knee like that or go through the front of their shin.
Yeah.
And
oh no! So her right knee just completely hyperextended. It's like an explosive knee bar.
Yeah.
So what happens is their feet get caught out of position. They can't move them back anymore. All the weight comes down and just... Yeah, I mean, you see dislocated femurs, you see horrible injuries from this.
I have the same rules in my classes. I actually was just going through that recently, and I said to people, look, I've got, like, these techniques are banned. If you're going to run the risk of putting someone out of training for potentially 12 months, if I see you do it, I'm going to send you off the mat for the day. Like it's not going to be a, hey, don't do that. That's a warning. It's going to be, no, you're off the mat straight away. Yeah. And I think that's fair. Otherwise people don't pay it. Like people don't want to listen. Even talking to Keller about it, he said exactly like what you're talking about with the sagging into the side of the knee. Like Tani Otoshi, he said the worst injuries he's ever seen in judo come from Tani Otoshi, and people were responding the same way, the wrong way. He said obviously if you take a judo black belt and someone sits into it the wrong way, they're not going to have a tough time dealing with it. They can drive into them, take them over, but if you got someone that's inexperienced, you're going to see some pretty serious injuries.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it's people either not knowing how to fall or just not expecting you were taking them that direction. They post their foot, so normally the foot is externally posted to the knee. They get dragged. Their foot can't slide along the mat to relieve the pressure. They get caught on the mat. That's another reason why I don't allow guys to wear wrestling shoes. I think wrestling shoes have a similar thing where they create such a stickiness. Yeah. You see a lot of knee injuries in wrestling, and a lot of the time it's things like that.
Yeah.
I think if anyone's listening, I think wrestling shoes are straight out stupid.
Terrible idea.
Stupid. Anyone here, and there's a bunch of people listening right now going, oh, but I get sore toes. I train jiu-jitsu 6 days a week. I'm 37 years old. I don't have to wear wrestling shoes to keep training. And I suppose if you're sparring and kicking people's elbows and then your toes are banged up, I get it. But wearing the wrestling shoes, it's not really... Unless you're going to compete in Olympic wrestling, it's not even a relevant piece of uniform.
I see people that have no wrestling aspirations whatsoever and they're training with wrestling shoes on. I'm like...
It looks cool, right? And it's I got my shoes on. I'm a wrestler. I'm a wrestler.
But I don't understand it. Why would you want to why would you not want to train the way that you're going to compete? It
Even
just
guys in MMA, right?
Yeah, I see MMA guys do it, and it doesn't make sense to me at all.
They're I've seen the Americans do it. I must just wear my wrestling shoes if I'm doing wrestling. I don't get it.
And they go oh yeah, but I can, it's easy for me to shoot takedowns and things like that. It's yeah.
You know what's to be easy? Get a gun. You just shoot him. It's easier. Just drop him on the ground. You can't use the gun in the fight, but it'd be good in training, right?
Yeah. And so what's going to happen then when you go and compete? You don't have the wrestling shoes on. You're oh, I actually have no drive from this position. It's like, yeah, you probably should have trained without the wrestling shoes on, and then you would have worked this out, not in the ring.
Especially when you're getting the grappling exchanges and, we're talking about picking up, like even ankle picks. Ankle picks are different without shoes on as they are with shoes on.
Totally changes.
Such a different... I can connect myself with 2-on-1s to shoes, and basically you're not clearing your foot. We know super slippery. Guy points. Sometimes they slip feet.
Yeah.
Yes, you should be.
And like even if it's not wrestling, like jiu-jitsu, it's like how easy is it to heel hook someone wearing wrestling shoes? It's just right there. You have you get
you can just reach through and just cup the heel, and you get enough rotation.
I could just do a shit heel hook and it's going to be easy.
Do you remember the old pancration days?
Oh, I wonder if like those high knee boots almost make it look worse, because they almost look like they don't quite twist as perfectly, but at the same time I'm like, I wonder if that's just wishful thinking on my part, because some of those leg locks look rough.
And there was some bad breaks because guys like either didn't know what they were in. Did you know they had a funky rule about you grab the ropes like pro wrestling and stuff? I want to say, I could be wrong. My iPhone just told me I've got to stand up. No, my iWatch. Apple Watch. No, I'm sorry, man. I'm busy. I want to say there was a rule because Elvis, my coach, fought in pancration against Frank Shamrock. Yeah. And there was some funky thing where they was like grabbing the rope. I can't remember it. It's an odd...
because this would have been fighting in Japan then, correct?
It was,
yeah. Like they...
Judo and...
They had like a weird combination of like basically professional wrestling.
Dave, bring up like Pancrase, Shudo, Japan leg locks.
Honestly, you can even find a recent match if you want to look up Gabby Garcia versus whoever that old woman was that she fought, and she's like bouncing off the rope like around the ring, like doing like the full bounce back.
Was that at work? Do you think that was at work? But they just told that old lady to go in, and like Gabby didn't get told it was at work, but do you think the other girl did?
What was it called?
Well,
just look up pancration, Shuto, leg locks, Frank Shamrock. I don't know, you'll find something like that. Bass Bruton used to be in there too. Yeah.
Pancreation.
This is the future, people. This is the children of school now. This is
Shamrock.
Yeah, this is the future. There we go. Bass Root and Vest Frank. I mean, we just wanted Ken Shamrock, the original leg lock specialist. Look at that.
I think actually even in the original UFC, who was it? Frank that fought Hoist Gracie was attempting a heel hook on him.
That was Ken.
Attempted a heel hook on Hoist, and he actually defended that like reasonably well, because I think the match before that Ken had won by heel hook.
Sorry, but can you, for your next grappling match, can you wear matching shoes and
fluoro
undies? And undies? I mean, that's not a bad wrist. That's actually not a bad... Go back, Dave.
Fun fact, apparently Eddie Cummings started playing, like, didn't believe in Outside Ashy originally, and I think someone had recommended him watch some old Shuto matches where you see, like, a lot of the Japanese leg lockers weren't applying them from reaps, but from, like, an Outside Ashy.
Yeah. I mean, look, the guy in the green undies, he's turning his knee just the wrong direction. I mean, he's just turning into the heel hook. I mean, if he just turned his knee out, Frank would have never got his heel.
It's funny how, depending on when in the last 10 years you went back and looked at this match, you would have been like, that's like not bad, or that's completely terrible. Like
I mean, look, it is terrible. I mean, that was just a straight foot lock on his Achilles. Look, Frank looks pretty jacked then, right?
But I'm still impressed for like the times that like when this occurred though.
Look, he's going to step over into an outside Ashy. Look at this. Oh, knee bar. Oh, the guy's trying to kick him in the face. Oh, he's past a 50-50. See, he wouldn't even know. Oh, he's just rotated.
I almost got optimistic then and thought, oh, maybe he's going to turn his knees to the inside too. He's going to play from like an 80-20. And I was like, nah.
I mean, what they're causing there is just severe. It seems holding the ropes. They're causing severe lower leg rotation.
Yeah.
That's a cross body. That's like a 50-50 straight foot lock that time. The other guy, I don't know what he's saying. I'm grabbing the ropes. Look, I think there was a rule about that. See what he's saying to the referee? Frank Shamrock, look at this. Natural.
I think this was at a time when they were telling the fighters that we will not test you. Not just like they just like didn't mention any clause about like, you know, testing, but they specifically told them we will not test you for drugs.
That was Pride's thing. Pride's thing was like in big lettering specifically.
They want the freak show.
They want you on steroids. And look, you talk to a lot of people. People have differing views. I mean, from a entertainment point of view, it's like at the Coliseum, I want to see the gladiators that are jacked fighting the biggest lions. I don't like, but if you're an athlete or you're someone that's in the game trying to
Compete.
coach people. I mean, you probably want it to. It either needs to be all or nothing, I suppose. Like basically allowing a degree of cheating is not good. It's either got to be. I think the UFC have got a pretty good testing program now. I think it's as good as you could probably.
I've heard
get it.
mixed things about that, because I think one of the issues with drug testing, like I'm all for like taking steroids out of the sport. One of the issues I do
I thought
see
you were
with,
saying I'm all for taking steroids. I'm like, yeah, man, we're going to get Jack Jeremy.
I was going to say, if I was on steroids, I need to get my money back.
They've been selling you just straight out oil.
One of the disadvantages I see to drug testing, or one of the negatives, is that it basically becomes then a money issue. If you have more money, you can pay for the designer drugs, like you can, like something that
Yeah, I
isn't
see what you're
tested
saying.
for.
Yeah.
That's the disadvantage
Everyone's
I see,
gotta
and it
have-
actually.
They have to have a price cap on what you're allowed to spend on your steroid program.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to show receipts for your steroids from your dealer. And it's like, I only spent $200 a week. That's like the limit, right?
Yeah, because then it becomes a matter of, like, it actually in some ways would almost increase the divide between like upcoming athletes that, like, like they're getting tested, they can't afford the designer steroids, while you got the guys at the top that probably can afford these things, or just someone that's simply bankrolled, like can just come through and smoke the competition. That's not a endorsement of steroids, but it's just like,
This is Jeremy's key features to how to run a steroid program.
what I'm saying is I am too poor to afford steroids.
What he's saying is he needs a sponsor to get the best steroids.
Buy my instructional.
Imagine you just jacked at 90 kilos, like Toquinho, you just can't even barely move. Yeah, that car alarm's fantastic. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, it's
Excellent.
good. It's good that the academy's in the middle of town because you get a lot of people and it's kind of convenient for students. But for what we're doing today, I kind of wish we were tucked in the back area somewhere.
What are you talking about? I
Who
find
has
the
car alarms nowadays? Who even have that? Yeah.
I find the screaming of Darrow soothing.
Penrith's a special location. It's I mean, I'm used to it now. I've been here a lot of years, and I make a point of not living in Penrith. It's like I love the city for work and for the things it has, but I like to live slightly away from it. But look, I can't say enough good things of how much it's fantastic. There's such a good group of people out here as far as my student base, and there's not many other big jiu-jitsu gyms out here. So it was like, for me, it was like, oh, this makes, I live here and there's no one else really doing jiu-jitsu, and it's kind of just worked out right, in that regard.
It's reasonably accessible. Like, for me, heading out this way, like the big issue is driving, because like you go through a lot of toll gates, things like that. But like you're quite close to the train station. Like it's not a bad spot to be. It's actually even like you got the shopping centre and things like that around here. It's actually not too bad.
We've got the shops. We've got Centrelink. Centrelink's very busy here.
Yep.
I go past in the morning, and Centrelink, when I'm coming to work, has a line out the door and down the street, and I always think, I'm going to work. Those guys are going to work too for their government dollars. They got to line up. And
You ever think about just jumping in line just for the hell of it, just to sort of stand around and peruse, like fit in with the locals?
I really like junkies. They make me smile. I like watching them from a distance, but having to deal with them face to face.
You don't want to be in smelling distance of them.
I don't want to be in smelling distance. I don't want to have to get in a fight with them because they like fighting people. And something people don't know about, probably you're the same, the kind of more martial arts you do, the less fights you have or want to get into.
Yeah. I'm tired from training. Like.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? I feel like your ego doesn't have that thing where you've got to challenge everyone. Because your ego gets beaten down and equalised, and it gets like mellowed a bit. And I think because we're constantly just bashing each other up every day, you've got that output done.
I go back and forth on that, because then you do see the UFC fighters that just go and decide to go pick a fight with someone or bash their misses.
There's going to be.
You would hope that of all people, John Jones would have his ego in check, but apparently not. Becoming the the light heavyweight champion or whatever he was, like, would make him think that he doesn't need to sort of get into altercations, or
I think he definitely has a substance abuse issue, right? I mean, that's what it is. Like, he seems to be, when he's sober, he seems to be fine. I mean, his issue is, why does he need to? Is it an addictive personality? I mean, it's people that we have addictive personalities for what we're doing. You definitely see people who then apply that also to other areas of our life that is not a positive thing they're following.
Yeah.
What about, did you see, who's the kickboxer? His name was right on the tip of my tongue. He was in Nick Diaz's corner the other day. He's a glory kickboxer. Schilling. Dave. YouTube. What's Schilling's first name? He got in a fight in a. Tapenia going into some legs there. This was,
I'm going to be mean. The guy with the big nose. Is that the one? Fights out of Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the guy.
His first name just gone out of.
I think trained with him super briefly when we were in Thailand,
really?
2019.
Doing jiu-jitsu.
I think he was just there at the gym, just at the absolute MMA in Thailand.
He's lived in Thailand for a while. Just right, Schilling bar fight MMA or something like that. What's his first name?
I'm totally blanking on it.
Oh, sorry guys.
We're going to see
Joe Schilling. Joe Schilling. Okay, so Joe Schilling. Go to maybe the second one there. It's Joe Schilling, KO's guy. So Joe's like a legit one of the best Muay Thai fighters in the world, and this drunk guy, the guy. First of all, what is this guy wearing? Unless he's come straight from work, and if you wear that to work, I don't know. So he's got. This guy clearly is pretty intoxicated. And Schilling, who's a very high level fight. Oh no, he's just lit this guy up, and the guy's knocked out on the ground. So.
I remember reading his reaction. I saw this, and I remember seeing his reaction. Yeah, he said the guy was coming past and making comments.
He was saying things like the guy was saying racial comments to other people, and then was kind of saying stuff to Joe. And that guy just picked the wrong guy to be a douchebag too.
Because is Schilling? Is he Jewish or anything like that? He was making some comments to him as well. I
don't know what it is, but. So you're saying MMA fighters like that guy, and here's the thing, right? I suppose everyone has a line of what they're willing to accept. Like he said, that guy was obnoxious the whole night. Now, from my point of view, though, what I think to myself there, if I hit that guy, most guys that know how to punch, if you hit a guy who's not ready, you're probably going to hurt him.
Yeah.
I'm always considering, if he hits his head on the ground, that's a hard surface. That guy could die, and I can't justify killing a guy because he said a name to me. And
you don't know what sort of what is? I think there's actually even a legal precedent for it in the US. It's thin skull rule, something like that. Just this idea of if someone's got a pre-existing condition, and you get into an altercation with them and they die, some rules related to that. But it's even if it's you're not legally at fault in a situation like that, it's still it weighs on your conscience, and it's just not worth getting
it's
into.
Not ideal. How do you think that'd go down for you and I? We'd have to sit down into a seated guard and then challenge him to come over to us, and then we'd heel hook him if he walked near us. That'd be pretty cool, right?
I'd probably get taken out by all the needles that are on the ground in the real world. And what is it? The needles in the concrete would take me out.
Yeah, sometimes we find needles out the back from the ladies that work at Breathless, actually.
You mentioned jumping guard and Kani Basami and things before. I remember I posted about on Instagram recently just about I actually think it should be banned in competition even at a high level. Just it's you even see at a high level guys just jump through the side of someone's knee and cause serious injury. Someone's response to that was, yeah, but scissor takedown's such a good technique for self-defense. And I was like, please tell me how.
Oh. Did you get more out of him out of that or not?
Got no elaboration.
Yeah.
They just went on to the next thing and argued about some other nonsense.
I've never thought about jumping a Kani Basami if I get an so maybe when I go to Centrelink and I have a chat with my friends down there.
Yeah.
Kani Basami.
I love the thought process behind that. It's let's go from a standing position where I'm relatively safe, I can back away, I and jump in the air, hope that I don't hit my head on the ground, and then just potentially end up underneath several people.
That's an interest. You should have elaborated with that guy.
I wanted more out of him, but he had other arguments about why
this is back to the judo. Just a little Kosotogari and just dump him on his back, and I'll be on top. It's probably a better option.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's not a place for it at the ADCC level?
The issue I have with it is that essentially, the worse you are at the technique, the more effective it becomes. And I can put a lot of confidence in my ability to practice that technique, but I put zero confidence in anyone else to actually put that same amount of effort into it, because it's no consequence for the person attacking it if it goes wrong. They just they go, I injured the other person. Oh well, I get to go on to the next round. I get to train for the next 6 to 12 months. While me on my end of things, zero opportunity to tap. It's gonna potentially blow out my knee. Purely because they could just do a cool leg lock entry. I think it's a very effective technique.
What do you think about there being onus on an individual, in a standing position of having to be aware of that's a possibility and keeping themselves, Like if I pick up a single leg on someone who wants to hit Kani Basamis, now I have to consider that that's a, that's an extra. It's kind of like we just talked about it with judo. If you start to water the rules down, do we get away from what we love about the thing or about the martial art?
Yeah, and like I'm on the side of removing it from the sport, but I can also see negatives to doing that because I don't want to go down that route of like, okay, well, this is unsafe, and then we remove the next most unsafe thing.
Yeah, it's like, choking someone across their jaw. It's a bit unsafe. We'll cut that out. So now nobody can get a back strangle because all the guy's got to do is put his chin down, right?
Because I think that's the case in judo, actually. You have to have the lapel underneath the neck. Otherwise, you can't go over the face or anything like that. I think like that is actually a rule in judo.
Like you see some good sleeps, but you'll see a lot of them where just nothing happens.
They just chill out.
What is it? I mean, have you seen in judo, it's like the referees just fucking hate the competitors. Dave, bring up judo strangle, put to sleep or something like that. The referees, like the guy gets put out unconscious and the referees stand there like, get the fuck up. What are you doing? You're in the way. Like
it's
a weird thing, isn't it?
It's I'd say like embarrassing.
Are they coached to not touch them or something? What's the game?
It seems like it's like embarrassing the competency of judo reffing when it comes to any level of grappling.
Here we go. So, how long does this go for? So she's got a clock strangle in here, and they're like, no one ever taps for some reason. So sometimes they're out for like a substantial period of time. I think that gore's out already, I would say, from the look of that body.
Yeah, she's not retaliating.
She looks like a corpse. And look, the ref's like, all right, yep.
Well,
we'll call the match there.
I guess she's naturally in the recovery position there already.
Yep. Oh, she's up. I thought he was just going to give the other girl the win. Oh, there must be a few, is there? Because you see, they go straight into strangles from throws because they've already got the lapel grip, right? This is another clock strangle. And I find girls are more savage than we are. They're less likely to tap. They absolutely refuse. Yep, she's out. Look at the position of her left leg. That's not a conscious person. Oh, no. Is her hand moving? What? I mean, that doesn't look ideal, right?
They're definitely out at this stage. Yeah, you can see like that right foot there. It's.
Oh, no.
Have you seen on Instagram that Valhalla Club? I think both Ari and Hope are on there as referees that have borderline let someone die in a match.
Bring it up, Dave. Do they have something on YouTube or not? Yeah.
I think it's just Instagram, but you should be able to bring up the post on Instagram. It's Valhalla Club.
I mean, look, that girl's still unconscious.
I think if you just go to Google and like look for the page, you'll be able to find it.
What is it called?
I think it's like if you put in like Valhalla Club BJJ Instagram, you should be able to find it. And it's just, there you go. Maybe that's it.
Do we have to log in?
Oh, no.
If you log in there, will that, that should just, yep. Is that going to work? No.
Oh, that's all right. We'll just leave it. But there's, some great match footage of just someone borderline dying and the ref hasn't stopped it yet. Or, the ref's looking the other way while like the action's going on. And it's tough because they're in a tough position. You're refereeing at like a Grappling Industries and you're standing there for about 4 hours at least.
And the rest.
Yeah. And
I refuse to referee anymore. It's just, for a while there I'd do it to help because I'm like, I want to give back to the community that kind of helped me get to compete as well. But then
after you get through 10 white belt matches,
and look, I understand we need to have competitions. I get it, but I don't want to have to watch you grapple. Yeah. I don't even want to have to watch my own white belts grapple. I want to shut my eyes and just tell me what happened.
Yeah.
That's just me. But I did a Grappling Industries once, and it was the one they did that was no time limit.
Oh, yeah.
Which overall I thought was a cool concept. It was like, look, most people aren't going to go that long. Guys are going to get tired. Something's going to happen. But it was like there was a couple of guys there that day that either just wanted to have long matches or just didn't have the ability to actually finish each other. They didn't know enough finishing techniques to finish each other. And I refereed a match that took an hour and a half between two white belts.
Oh, my God.
Halfway through the match, I got so sick of it that I had to ask my friend to step on from the other mat, take over, so I could go to the bathroom and come back, and it was still going. And like, that was not good for anyone. It was like this same guy had a few matches that day that went up in the hour club, and it was just, I don't know, I think he just didn't have finishing ability.
The cardio was very impressive, though.
Look, it was like the output wasn't. It was a lot of just laying, and there was no you were kind of looking for reasons to disqualify people at that stage because it's just bad.
I like no time limit matches, but when we're talking like actual high level black belts, like
but I still think there needs to be a degree of you can't just have straight out stalling, or else like people don't want to see you both just stand there and not even go near each other. Like that's not advantageous to anyone, not you two, not for people watching. I think not giving it time means it's an interesting concept because now the only way this finishes is either I give up or you give up. So I think there's a very interesting mental aspect to it that there's not in a normal match. I mean, plenty of guys can be like, he got 2 points on me. He didn't really beat me. He got 2 points. Whatever. Yeah, you can justify things.
The moral victory that people sort of give themselves.
People do it all the time. But for you to go either I quit or just he absolutely got me, that's very definite. So I do like it. You couldn't have every match like that. Gordon had a couple of long. Gordon and Keenan was a long one. It was an hour and a
that's
half.
the one that always stands out in my mind. And I actually like to rewatch that match. Like it's a really interesting match. Like I feel like all the way through it, but it's still like 90 minutes of like two people grappling with each other, and that can be tough. Like ADCC, like the finals can be really tough when they have a 40-minute match and not a whole lot is happening. Like I think the classic example is like Cabrinho and Rafa Mendes, where they did 40 minutes of shit wrestling.
Yeah, that sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rafa Mendes never submitted in competition. What do you think about that? Never submitted in competition.
I don't even know what to say about that because that's just so ridiculously impressive. Like even
for the guy that competed at the level he did, I mean, it's
at the age that he did it, and also across like both gi and no gi jiu-jitsu, just like he really was like the person who could do it all. He's almost the only real thing that he had against him was the fact that he couldn't do absolute division because he competed at about 66 kilos. I think he would have even greater notoriety.
Cut some weight to get to 66. I think he's probably a bigger individual than you, and you compete at 66 as well.
I was going to say he's like me, but same build as me, I believe, but like actually has muscle on him.
Wonder how he got that muscle, do you think, Jeremy? There was a lot of accusations over the years made, wasn't there?
A lot of praying.
Yeah.
A lot of praying.
Jesus is good like that. Anyway. So ADCC, I wanted to talk about. It's finally ADCC year next
year. It was meant to be this year.
It was meant to be this year, and all the COVID bullshit. And finally, we've got trials happening, and we've got the American trials happening in a couple of weeks.
I think that's about 2 weeks out. Yeah. I think it's 700 and something competitors registered.
740 odd competitors, which is fantastic.
Absolutely stacked divisions. I think there's 125 people registered at, was it 66 kilos maybe?
Oh, really? 60, so normally 77's the stacked division.
It might be 77 that has got 125 competitors.
Because
actually no, I think 66 is the 120 something, and it's like 200 and something at 77.
That would make sense, because last time Jason Rao competed on the West Coast, on the East Coast, he competed both, but on the East Coast trials, it was a division of, I want to say, about 80 odd people. He had to have 6 matches to be able to win it. He ended up losing the final by points, but he had to have 6 matches. Like there's a certain skill to just maneuvering your way through a tournament that I often think about and try to talk about with my students, because I find super fights nearly a little easier because
I find it easy to prepare for.
I also think to myself, it's like it's one guy. I know who he is.
Yeah.
Like when it's a tournament, you really sometimes you don't even know who it is, and there might be some random stud in there that you don't even know. I mean, it's unlikely at the kind of level we're competing at, but you generally you kind of know the guys. But you go in, there's a blue or purple. There's some guy there that just is a killer you didn't even know, and there's a match that was harder than you thought it was going to be, or it's hard to continually. And there's also that thing of you see your opponents doing their matches, and you can easily be like, Jesus, he beat that guy.
But
and
you also
you know it. You're like those sort of things don't come up in super fights as much, you know.
I wonder how much of that is down to individual mentality and like the ability to cope and like I guess like process that sort of information. I was having a conversation with Ross Nichols recently, high-level competitor, like high-level black belt out of the UK, qualified for ADCC. I think he fought JT Torres opening round to a decision, which I think is very impressive. Like JT is absolutely
he's a stud,
yeah. And he's the complete opposite. He actually prefers tournaments, and I wonder if that's just down to the ability to like your ability to focus on other people versus your ability to focus on yourself. Like when I prepare for super fights, I focus quite a lot on the other person, and like I study all their matches, but I can I feel comfortable doing that, while it might be people feel more comfortable not looking at their opponents at all and like focusing on themselves, and maybe it makes it easier mentally to tackle like a tournament format, as well as probably other things related to cardio and
yeah, I mean, you got that,
and your particular
you do
strategy.
Just have the longevity of having to go start early in the day, and there's also just the fatigue you have that people don't consider. Like, let's say 6 matches, you got up that morning. Who knows? Maybe you didn't sleep as well. There was, a bit of restlessness. You've got a big thing, especially ADCC trials. It's our Olympics. So all these things, you try not to put pressure on yourself, but just due to the nature of the fact that it's happening, is going to put a bigger degree of pressure than you just coming to the gym that day.
Yeah.
So you're already a bit tired, and then you start your first match in the morning, and you work. Before you know it, we know adrenaline will make you tired more than anything else. But at the end of the day, when you've got to have your biggest match, the one that matters, you're tired, maybe your foot sore, you got popped earlier in another match. I really take my hat off to people that can go through a long tournament and just continually just provide the goods. There's a lot to be said for that. Rather than just going and winning one match.
Yeah, I agree. Like I find like tackling like a super fight just like much easier. I find it easier to like rationalize to myself that this person has nothing he can throw at me and surprise me. But as you're making your way through a competition, like as you said, you can be looking at the other guy, but you haven't seen all the other matches that guy had. He might have something in his back pocket for you, and I think tackling a tournament, you need to have a more airtight game potentially. Like I think super fights, you can almost go in and prepare a very specific strategy for a particular opponent, while I think tournaments you need to be a lot more well-rounded, and like it's almost like a balancing act. And you see it sometimes with specialized competitors that go into a tournament where like maybe they blow through a couple of opponents, but then they got caught up in another area where the other person might not have even been particularly good at that area of the game, but like the specialist has like a complete deficiency, and that makes it tough.
Yeah, so ADCC's, I mean, it's more popular than ever before. Jiu-Jitsu is more popular than ever before, but the way that ADCC is putting together these tournaments now, it's exciting. It's a big show. Like, I remember competing in the trials in 2011, I want to say, 2010. It was in Melbourne.
Yep.
And there was, like, Kit Dale and a heap of other guys down there. And I remember it was just in a basketball court. There was a couple of mats. It was like, when I look back at the footage, just like it happened in the 1920s, it's ridiculous. And then you look at even to what it is now. I mean, our trials are going to be pretty busy, and there's going to be some really good grappling. I know you don't want to make predictions because you've got your finger in a few pies as far as academies.
Yep.
But who are we looking at to watch out for maybe the divisions? Are you willing to talk about that, or?
There's one where I feel like I can say, I think undeniably so, 77 division, Ethan Thomas. Like I think that's the one where I look at that and I don't even think it's up for debate. Like even if you like have like people you're friends with and things like that, like I think the other divisions, like there's more wiggle room on it. Like I could make predictions on other divisions. I think Ethan for 77 is it.
Yeah, well, Ethan's one of. It's weird saying he's one of my students. He's a fellow black belt with me here at Sydney West. I don't know if calling him a student's the right thing, because he's just so fucking good. Like, but I'd like to maybe think of myself as Ethan's coach. I'm pretty high on him, but a lot of coaches are high on their own individuals. But even if I'm being quite open-minded, which generally I am, I think he's got the tools to do very well.
Yeah.
Good competitor. He's young enough. He's in his prime. He's a legitimate black belt. He's good at wrestling. For ADCC, he just ticks all the boxes. Super hard to submit.
Yeah. And that's sort of my thought on why I'd pick Ethan for that division. Like I just mentioned, tournament format, I think you need to be very well-rounded. Like you can't have any sort of skill that's like got like a massive hole in it. Ethan isn't just that though. Every single skill that he has in the sport is at an incredibly high level. Like his submission game, his ability to pin people, with like in jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, it's all just at a superb level. And he has the ability to basically change his strategy for every single opponent. And yeah.
I'm excited to see where he goes. He's always he still hasn't had that big breakout match. Like, you talk to You talk to people in Australian Jiu-Jitsu and they know your name, they know Lachlan, they know... There's certain guys that are like, oh yeah, these are the guys. There's still a lot of people that don't know who Ethan is. Yeah, they hear of this kind of mythical, there's this guy getting around that's good. But I think he's still got to show it, and I think these trials are going to be interesting for that.
I agree with that. Like, I think there are people that are in the know about Ethan, but I think there's going to be a lot of people very shocked at trials about that. I remember when I first came to Sydney, like maybe nearly 2 years ago at this stage, or a year ago at the very least.
Yep.
Giles was messaging me and he said like, "Oh, have you rolled with Ethan yet? Like, how's that going?" And it's like, terrible. I'm getting bashed.
It is terrible. It's terrible. I roll with him every day, and it doesn't get any better. Like some days he doesn't submit me as much, but I'm telling you, it's just miserable. His game is crushing. It's very, you know, and I'm not giving away anything that other people haven't seen, but it's gonna be. And look, there's legit that 77 division is legit.
It's the toughest division, I think, because basically you're taking like average build, like probably the largest demographic of males would like sort of like that demographic there, and then they're all jacked. Like you're basically taking like any average build man like that, like makes up like the largest demographic of men, and then like they've all just got like a layer of muscle on them. Yeah, which is why I'm staying at 66.
Tell me about it. So who we got going at 60? So are you looking to compete still? Is that what the plan is at this stage?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of troubles with injuries over the last 2 years. I've only really competed once in that 2 years against Cannon. I'll do 66 for this trials.
Which you hooked up a beautiful... Actually, Dave, bring it up. Where are we going to find footage of that? Is that on YouTube?
I think it's on YouTube.
It was a nice triangle set up from a seated guard from memory. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, from a knee shield guard, like a Kimura into an ankle triangle Americana, basically going over the top there where you'd go in towards like, you know, like a belly down armbar, but instead a back step with the right leg. I think you'll see like Nicky Ryan...
Why are we looking at motorbikes, Dave? Jeremy Skinner versus Lucas.
No, Cannon, not Lucas Cannard. I think I competed against Lucas 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago.
Speaking of Lucas Cannard, that guy is a monster. Have you trained with Lucas yet?
Not for a long time. Is he looking at doing trials?
I don't know. He's such an unassuming guy. He kind of makes out like he's not very good, but he is. He's really, really good. He could go in the trials. Now, he's got that Unity game where they play De La Riva and they invert and they use bolos. So it's a very specific type of game. Yeah. But I'm telling you, that guy, for anyone that doesn't know, that I think in the gi, he's a brown belt still, but I mean, he could be a black belt. I think in the gi, he might be one of the best guys in Australia.
I feel like at this stage, like the belt almost doesn't even matter for competition, which I think is like the way it should be.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Is he working his wrestling? Do you know?
No, so not a lot. I know he does train with the guys down at Sydney Wrestling Academy, I think it is, but I don't know specifically. You're not having any luck there.
So if you get rid of Lucas Cannon, I did actually have a match against Sam Kanan.
Kanan Jones, that's his name?
Cannon Clark Jones.
Cannon Clark Jones.
Yeah.
Kanan Clark Jones,
which Isaac had a really nice match against at Nogi Worlds just recently.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's not underestimate. We didn't talk about Isaac, but depending on what division he does, I mean, that kid is a stud.
Yeah, I think he's looking at doing 88. I think is the plan.
Yeah. You've had 2 matches with him.
Two matches, long time ago. Like
both victories, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that Isaac's getting heavier and heavier, because I like when we've done wrestling training together, it's not close. Like he'll just like pick me up and he can like walk me around a high crutch.
His skill progression, and that's what people need to remember. Let's say there's still a lot of people out there that are like to come back to Gordon. They're like, Penna submitted him on the back, and it's like, okay, yes he did. All credit to him in that moment. But the rate of progression that people can have if they're doing very good training, they can be a totally different grappler in a year. Totally different. If you're doing good training, you nearly should be if you're doing things right. So, you know, the rate of progression of people is phenomenal. You see some of these athletes who are just stud athletes and their progression just skyrockets. I mean, we're seeing that with definitely with Isaac. You know?
Isaac's just getting better and better and better. And you're seeing he's also...
So he's a brown belt world champion. He took that out the other day. Yeah.
After getting his brown belt, how long ago?
I mean, he was... So Isaac trained here for
quite a while. Picked up a lot of...
Yeah, did train for a while, and he was obviously still a purple belt. And I remember saying to him, mate, I mean, you're not a purple belt. I know everyone else knows you're not a purple belt. You're at black belt level.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And he always he'd been graded. I forget whether John gave him his purple belt or whether
Leo Aruda in Adelaide.
And I think he always wanted to be graded under John or Craig, right?
Yeah.
And so I never graded Isaac. He was here and he was kind of stuck here, couldn't get anywhere. So we had this kid who was wearing a purple belt for all intensive purposes, but would just give everyone nightmares.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's been given his brown belt. You could give him a black belt today, and
Easily.
it would make no difference.
Easily. Like, if you look at his run at Nogi Worlds, like, it wasn't just he won Nogi Worlds. Untouchable.
Dominating.
Untouchable.
Yep. He out-wrestled him. He did better jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
He scored. He submitted them.
Yeah. He submitted. I think he only had maybe one match where he didn't submit his opponent, maybe
so
two
he
matches.
Didn't submit Kanan, and maybe two, but that's not always a representation. Like, there's plenty of guys who submit everyone who don't do as well. Kanan was like tough.
Yeah.
And
that's not a slight against Isaac that he didn't submit to opponents. No, he dominated all of them.
But people might think, that means he didn't do that well. But yeah, it was super impressive. And in the final, he had this Dagestani dude who'd been training at Marcelo's, who was a very good wrestler.
Yeah,
Isaac took him down immediately.
Yeah.
Submitted him to finish.
That was such an interesting match going into it because I remember leading up to the match, just like talking to Craig, like as like in the lead up to Isaac going on for that match, like between that and his semi-finals, and we were talking about that because his opponent, a Ukrainian competitor that had won various wrestling competitions.
He wasn't Dagestani, was he?
No, he'd won a lot of competitions though in Dagestan for wrestling, in both I think like Dagestan and like broader Russia.
Sorry to jump in on you there, but what happens with Dagestanis is there's only so many of them that can compete. Like especially when it comes to Russia, only one can get the Olympic spot. So a lot of them go to other countries just so they can get their Olympic spot. Yeah. Otherwise, so a lot of them come from Dagestan.
So it might be he's actually Dagestani, but he's competing out of Ukraine.
I thought that's what the case was, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
But like that was a very interesting match because you have this guy with all these wrestling accolades, and like going to that match, I'm like, this is interesting because, you know, obviously Isaac's been working on his wrestling, but is it going to be at like that level? And really, actually, what I thought it came down to in that match was it wasn't down to the wrestling. It was late stage escapes and whether or not you were going to use escapes that exploited the rules of jiu-jitsu or the rules of wrestling. Like, for example, like Isaac was able to, like, was happy to expose his back to the mat in those late escapes to not get taken down, while his opponent almost like didn't want to get sat down to his butt, but also didn't want to turn away and.
Probably a smart idea against Isaac.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
in doing that, he gave up points.
Yeah, exactly. And then he got taken down clean in the end. And I think really like it came down to those late escapes because then after that it was pure domination from Isaac. But I feel like the turning point on that in at least the wrestling exchange was who had the better late stage escapes for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's a good point. And in doing that, I think he kind of broke the guy a little. I think that guy was like, I nearly had him down and then he's up and then he just took me down. I think that there was like a mental thing that happened there, and it just kind of went downhill from there for the guy.
Just broke because I feel like he, like, you know, I think that Ukrainian through most of his matches was really just working his wrestling. I think he had quite a few matches that basically just went to the end, and he'd won like on advantage or on points.
I mean, that happens with the wrestlers a fair bit. So, talking about the trials for us, we got them coming up in March. What I'm hearing is early March. And it's going to be in Sydney, which is nice. Melbourne, we've blacklisted Melbourne. Melbourne's, you've had your chance. You guys are done now.
I said for a long time,
people that live in Melbourne, but you guys probably aren't very happy with how you've been treated down there either.
I've said for a long time the trials need to happen in Sydney and not Melbourne. I just think there is a much larger culture for competition in Sydney. You're going to have more people showing up. You can actually turn it into a spectator event. I think the jiu-jitsu in Melbourne, you have Absolute.
Yeah, of course.
High-level gym. Like
they've always been the shining light of Australian jiu-jitsu, yeah.
But if you look at in Melbourne, and if you took away Absolute, there's not really any other gyms there that are...
Yeah, that's always interested me, because I don't know the scene there. Is it, like when it comes to tournament time, is it kind of Absolute... like causing some mayhem generally in the medals?
There's Australian Elite Team, which is like a really big gym there, but in terms of caliber... They more or less get like the team trophy by having just a lot of people show up. So I think really like this kind of like, in my opinion anyway,
those
only
team
Absolute
trophies are not a good indicator of. I've often talked to gentlemen that run tournaments, and I speak to them and I go, because I'm a gym owner, and it'd be nice to have a trophy that says you're the best team. I mean, that's a good a good little award for your hard work and you know, look at like other people look and go, oh, maybe that's where I should go and train. It shouldn't just be I had the most amount of people that paid money to come along, and it definitely shouldn't be I also had like 100 kids compete, and for some reason like adults and kids are mixed together, because as you and I know, kids jiu-jitsu is a very different thing to adult jiu-jitsu, you know. Always found that odd.
I agree with you on that in terms of like what the team trophy should be. I imagine on the host of the competition side of things, they probably want to encourage like people to just send their full team in and like get the team trophy.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, but from a coach's perspective, I feel like an adult specialist division should be worth maybe much more points than a child's division to 6-year-olds, both the 6-year-olds from the same gym, and no one else was in the weight division, so they took gold and silver, is worth the same amount or more than an adult winning a specialist. Like, that doesn't make sense as far as weight.
Or even just have like the kids trophy and the adults trophy.
Yeah.
Like, just completely separate the two.
Yeah.
But for that reason, that's why I think it'd be better off having the ADCC trials in Sydney. I just think you'd be able to get a lot more people around it, and you'd just be able to make it a bigger event overall, which is ideally what trials is going to become.
You right, Baby Dave? Thought he was waving to me over there. Are you getting bored, Baby Dave? How long have we been going for, mate?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay, cool.
That's going all right.
I'm happy. So the trials, George Hanlon's putting it together with John Donahue. Yeah, I'm saying that right, Donahue?
Yeah, Donahue. Yeah.
So John's always had the trials as his kind of thing that he organised, and I think he's in the last few years brought on George, who runs a lot of different promotions. Runs Subversion, runs the Oz Sub only, like. Runs also the ADCC Nationals when they're on. I think George has really shown he can put together a great event and also make it a spectator event. So I think this gives him an opportunity to combine the two together. Yeah, because that's what we're seeing with like the East Coast trials, for example, and the West Coast trials, is they're making it a spectator event. Like it's almost like, especially you look at the US trials, it's almost got as much credibility as like winning ADCC itself. Like if you're going to win like the American trials, like we just talked about, like the numbers that they've got for that event. It almost in some ways might even be more interesting than the actual ADCC, because you've got all the up-and-comers in that one competition, and they're all hungry. And there's a lot of names in there that we know as well now because of so many more shows being televised. So, look, I think you take out the West Coast, the East Coast or West Coast trials. I mean, you could put that in your Instagram bio. There's plenty of people. I kind of laugh at people that, the things they'll put in their Instagram bio. It's like, 25-time state champion or ADCC champion, but they won the local nationals. I've seen that a few times. And it was the beginner division, and there was them and like 3 other guys. Anyway, look, if that makes you happy, go for it. Put that in your bio, but don't try to mislead people of where your skill sets lie. It's funny, but I think if you win the East or West Coast trial, especially this time around, remember it's very different to what it was making ADCC in 2003 compared to 2022 is probably a more difficult prospect. Same as fighting in the UFC now as opposed to back in the day. It was a different thing. It was a different litmus test to be able to make it through. And I think like flow grappling's really changed that for the trial specifically. Like even like ADCC itself, like the actual ADCC Worlds is a lot more accessible now compared to what it was before. But also trials is becoming more and more accessible, so it's just becoming an event in its own right. Well, we were supposed to have 2 trials, as people probably know, and it just Singapore, right? Yeah. So they've said it's postponed. The previous ADCC was Japan and Kazakhstan, and the Kazakhstan trials got straight out cancelled. I think because they just didn't have enough competitors. It was ridiculous. I think it was more the issue that there wasn't enough international competitors, like non-Kazakh competitors going to the trial. So it was essentially like... It was just Kazakh's trials. So it was like a few of us Australians that went, and then like the rest of the entire division was Kazakhs. Were you part of the guys who were on the plane as it got cancelled? We were. It was the night before we were flying. I think it was the night before we were flying out, and like they'd announced that the trials were cancelled, and it was a whole thing where like I was in the middle of cutting weight at the time. Like I was dying, and I remember they announced it was cancelled, and that very moment I ordered a pizza, and so like I had the pizza arrive at my place. I took a bite out of like a slice of pizza, and then I got a call from Giles, and he goes,
are we still going to go? Because they might actually still have some invites on offer. So I had to like spit out the pizza, vomit the pizza up, and then I have a photo on my phone of like the whole pizza sitting in the bin.
Lovely.
And like trying not to cry because like I was so hungry.
Oh, that's worse than just not having the food, right?
Oh yeah. Like if like I got a taste of it and I was like, oh, this is what I'm missing.
Was it?
I think it was like a 4-cheese pizza. Like it was just loaded on with
imagine how your guts would have felt after eating that cheese pizza. Cheese is rough at the best of times.
I borderline nearly kill myself with the amount of food that I consume after a competition. Like I just like I remember Japan, like same thing, like the day before, like
66 is not an ideal, like it's not ideal for you, is it? It's like
but neither 77.
No, you're kind of a tweener. You're somewhere in the middle there, unfortunately for you. You know, if they had like a 70 division, that'd be perfect for you.
Yeah, because I walk around like anywhere from about like 70 to 73. The heaviest I've ever gotten was like 76, but like that was like that was the only time I've ever been that heavy. Like even right now I'm only 70 kilos. Like lockdown was good I was probably the only person through lockdown that didn't put on weight. I actually managed to like lose a kilo by the end of it.
Baby Dave sitting behind the screen here has got a big smile. He definitely put on a few kilos.
Well, let's just keep that up so you don't do 66. We'll get you bumped up to 77.
And he has to compete against Ethan.
Or he does do 66, but the weight cut's going to be that hard for him that he'll just like
he'll be sapped. What about one day? He's a fucking idiot. He competed at the ADCC Nationals the time before last. They ran one, and instead of coming to me and talking to me, like I've had a lot of experience with weight cutting personally and with fighters, and instead of talking to me, he rocks up and has the worst match I've ever seen. It didn't even look like it was him. He got beaten by this guy who sucked, right? And I'm like, what was that about? He goes, I haven't drunk water for like a day and a bit. I said, why? He's like, I needed to make weight. So he stopped eating and stopped drinking and thought he'd compete and be fine doing this. And the guys, if you're going to cut weight for a tournament, make sure, one, that the weigh-ins aren't just before you go on, because you just can't do it. You're not going to compete. Go up a division, at least be full and compete how you can, even if you're outsized. Or if the weigh-ins are early, do it right. You know, don't just fucking not eat and drink. And
like I think for trials, like the 2 times that I've done it is like I weighed in at like 6 a.m. and didn't have to compete until 9. Like I was like ready to weigh in.
How did you find that? That's a 3-hour window. That's not compared to like 24-hour windows we deal with in MMA. Guys still can come into the fight nearly a bit dry if you really suck some water out of them. Like you still would have been a bit dehydrated.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm not saying it's the smart thing to do.
But your body fat was right down. I remember seeing a photo of you.
I looked disgusting.
You were right down. Like I don't know what more you could have done.
There was very little else I could do.
66 is just not an ideal.
No.
With your frame, it's just.
The problem I have is that 77. I guess the weight and power advantage is just like so far against me that.
Yeah, and it's tricky. I mean, we know just from the training room that. Just if your skills are similar, that extra horsepower makes a substantial amount of difference.
Like, and I'm not like exactly that. Like I have like matches where I've given up a lot of weight. Like I've actually had quite a few super fights where I've given up about like 7 to 10 kilos. Actually, I can't get a super fight at my weight. It's been really tough. So thank you, George, for putting together the match on Subversion against Talis and Suarez. So I'm looking forward to that, to actually getting to compete at my weight. But against high level opponents, like I don't want to be giving up that weight, like because you feel the difference. Like I feel the difference in the training room if I picked out someone at like that is about 66 kilos, someone that's 70 kilos, someone that's 77. Like I can feel the difference between all three of them.
There's always there's a position where we scramble and the stronger guy or the heavier guy can just make things. You've got to have a few battles go your way, and before you know it keeps going. And that's why I say with you, like any success in the training room is often due to a size disparity.
It doesn't feel like it. Like that's one where I'm like, this doesn't feel like a size disparity, because like
but I can feel it. I can feel it because I know if I'm going with a guy who's there's not many guys that are my skill level that are 10 kilos heavier that I train with often, but I just know those battles are so much harder. I've got some of my purple belts who are like 10, 15 kilos heavy, and it's like they can gap a pretty big skill discrepancy with their with their size and strength.
Especially you got like someone like Curtis who can just like pull a submission out of anywhere.
Yeah, he's dangerous. Yeah, he's one I'm looking forward to for. He's a bit of a dark horse in the division because there's in the 88 division there's definitely some favourites in there where you go, these guys are tried and tested and they should do very well, but a guy like Curtis is always able to submit anybody.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Curtis compete because I think he's got like a really interesting style for that division.
Yep.
And exactly as you said, I think he's a bit of a dark horse for it, and I don't think people are really expecting. I think people that don't know Curtis are going to be quite surprised when he comes in and he's going to submit a few people. Yes,
and I mean, then it comes down to how much of a big game player you are, and some people are big game players, and he's one. You know, we've seen it where there's people who compete better than they do in the training room. Yeah. You know, often he competes, and I'm like, where'd this come from? Like, Jesus. And then I watch him in the training, I'm like, you suck. And I love that. I'd rather a guy who's a big game competitor than the guy who does great in the training room but then just absolutely can't put it together.
And like never find, because at least like it's an opportunity for them to find some success in competition and like achieve their aspirations, as opposed to like you having in your head like I can do this but something falls short.
I can't get it out. Yeah, and there's so many, and that's as a coach. There's so many different ducks to get in a row to actually have an athlete who gets to a high level, let alone multiple athletes to a high level. But look, we could keep talking all day, and I enjoy talking with you, but we've all this new sound gear. I have to thank Matt Morris from MM Inc. I think I'm saying he's... yes, I did say...
That's a thumbs up.
Yeah, so I got a big thanks to Matty. He's the guru behind... if anyone here has watched Subversion, he puts together... Dave might even be able to bring up Matty's. He puts together... If you watch the Subversion cards that we run here out of Australia... The production is as good as a flow grappling event. That's all Matt Morris. It's all on him and his crew. I called Matty yesterday and said, look, I'm doing the podcast with Jeremy. I want to do things a little differently. And next thing you know, I've got a setup here that looks like we're on a movie set. So huge thanks to Matty. And I want to wrap it so he can take all his gear away. But yeah, look, thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you for having me on.
Again, I feel like we could just keep going and going and going. Maybe we'll do another one. Maybe I hope so. We'll keep going from there. But I think there's lots of... As we're getting out of the lockdown now, I think there's lots of exciting matchups coming up. So what we've got to look forward to for you going forward? Sure.
So I have, at this stage, three competitions coming up. So the most recent, like the soonest one will be the Boa Super 8, which will be November the 21st. So that's
not long at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very soon. It's at 80 kilos, unfortunately, but I couldn't turn out an opportunity to be on that card. It's a 8-person bracket. With some really high-level black belts from all around Australia competing against each other. There's going to be quite a few super fights on that as well, like leading up to it. My first super fight actually was on the previous Boa.
I remember it, yeah. Who'd you go against that night?
I went against Josh, I'm totally blanking on his last name, 10th Planet Black Belt from Melbourne. So that was my first super fight, and Craig fought on that. And the main card, like there was Ben Hodge on there as well.
Was that where DJ kind of just pointed everyone and Craig lost in the fight? Was that the one?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shame, but yep.
And so on that as well, my teammate Mikhail's going to be rematching Talis and Suarez. It's going to be a no-gi match this time, so that's going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Shortly after that, in January, I'll be on a 4-person sort of mini bracket on the M16 Open. So it'll be myself, Rod Costa, Mikhail Yahaya, and Ash Williams coming over from the UK.
Yeah,
so that'll be really good. And then
have you competed with Ash before you got against him?
No, I haven't. No. So Ash and I are friends, and like we've been trying to put together a match between him and I for a long time, because he has a similar problem to me, which is he's struggling to find opponents, because like there's not enough. Like once you get to the like you start making your way up, like the viable opponents like are fewer and fewer,
especially within a weight class that's reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. Like and exactly that, because Ash doesn't want to give up weights for super fights, and I don't think he should. So we've been trying to put that together for a while. So hopefully him and I match up, because like I think that'd be really interesting. As well as I'm actually just looking forward to getting some training in with Ash. Like that's I almost prefer that over the actual match, but like that'll be good too. And then we're looking at February for Subversion, where I'll be the main event going against Talis and Suarez. So that'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can pick up some interesting sort of insights into Talison's no-gi game after his match with Mikhail. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be bolos and We've seen him do stuff before, right?
Yeah,
It's predominantly bolos and back takes.
Yeah, I think the classic pro up in Queensland, Talison's had 2 matches. I think Aaron Blackie and Stuart Nickel, he's had matches against, and those gave a lot of insight. Those were both really interesting matches. Talison brings something different to no-gi. Something very different to his gi game. So it's one of those matches that I've got coming up where like I'm trying not to sort of like fangirl on it because like I'm excited about the match. Yeah, I taking
cool.
like a step back, looking at the match, going like, this is a match I would actually want to see.
Yeah, it's a fantastic matchup.
2 very different styles of grappling.
Subversion is, I think it's, if it's not the very best in Australia, it's right there with, as far as for how many cards they put on, especially in the last, little period of time. So yeah, it's pretty good show, and that one's going to be at a big live event too. So it'll be nice to have Subversion return to having like the big live audiences. Just with COVID and the restrictions on capacity, the last few events they've been streamed to a very high quality, but you don't have necessarily the same energy as when you've got all those people in the room. Yeah, and to make these things viable and be able to continue going, you kind of need people to go and support and buy tickets. So absolutely, like I want to make sure the event keeps happening. So like, and the best way to do that is with ticket sales. Yeah, for sure. So if you're in Sydney, or even if you're not, when that event comes around, be sure to get your tickets so you can come see it live. If not, watch the live stream. For sure. All right. Thanks, Jeremy. You're awesome. A good man. Thank you. Thank you, mate.